Date point. 4th year, 8th month, 2nd week, AV. Fall for colony, Simbrine, the far reaches. Adam Aries. A black belt in karate. Fucking hell. Wax on, wax off. The class laughed as Lexi pantomimed the exaggerated arm-waving motion and an all-too-serious expression. Adam laughed too, glad for the entertaining distraction, stopping him from going over and over the argument with Ava in his head. He hoped she was okay. Lexi sobered. Fucking seriously then, mate. Come here and come at me, he said, leaning on his back foot and gesturing towards himself, nonchalantly. The black belt stepped forward and took his guard. Lexi flashed forward with alarming speed for a man of his size. The black belt put up a few seconds of desperate resistance, but he fell flat on his back in the dirt in short order, with Lexi's knife, a length of wooden dowel, pressed to his throat. None of that bowling and scraping bullshit, the huge Welshman informed them, as he stood up. Karate is a sport. You lot are here to learn how to fight, and fighting means killing the other cunt before he kills you, not bowing and scoring points, alright? He helped the hapless student up. How many times did I stab him there? Anyone see? 3. No, 4, Adam said, raising his hand. Good boy. Lexi gave him a thumbs up. He turned to the black belt. You're dead, mate, which means you get to be my training dummy for the day. This drew general laughter, as the unfortunate man bravely lined up for demonstration. Lexi chuckled and waved a hand. Relax, pal, I'm taking the piss. Now, we're training for ET combat here, which is a bit difficult to fighting another human. The good news is, it's a lot fucking easier. ETs are slower, weaker, squishier, can't see, hear, or even smell as well as we do. All of these give you a huge advantage. The bad news is, they've got some tricks and technology up their sleeve that we don't, and this bad boy is human enemy number 1. Several people recoiled as the holographic projector, courtesy of Scotched Creek and the same technology that powered the colony's camouflage field, snapped on, and a full-sized hunter fidgeted and glared at them. It was truly hideous. An amalgam of several human nightmares, from its vaguely arachnoid physique and slick, pale skin, to the way that skin inflamed and exuded pus around the implants that violated his limbs, torso and face. The face itself was an otherwise featureless ovoid full of far too many steak knife teeth and an odd number of eyes, all of which blinked often and alone, without apparent sequence. The animation of the simulation was uncanny. It shifted its weight constantly, looking around, tasting the air with its tongue, which was an unnatural, startling ice blue, and tapered to a feathered end. Lexi surprised them by slapping the projection. It was the product of forceful technology after all, and in fact creating a solid surface was easier than creating a visible one. Ugly cunt, ain't he? He commented cheerfully. Well, it gets better. There's a fleet of these fuckers lurking right over our head right now. They've been here since we went public. The only thing holding them back is our system force field. And that's true for Earth too, just so you know. These bastards are why the militia exists. Because, if we have to fight these things off, we will. He turned towards the projection. There's not a lot to go on how these things live. What we know is they have leaders and followers. Like a wolf pack, there's the alphas, and the bottom of the pile, and everything in between. We know they'll eat any thinking being in the skies, man, woman, or child. We know that for some reason they really don't like us, and are on a crusade to wipe us the fuck out right now. Some poor bastard got killed just last week, catching an escape pod here. The hunters got him. Latest news is, they've started using special weapons just to stop us. Heavy pulse guns like getting smashed with a hammer, plasma guns that'll set you on fire, nerve-gun grenade launchers that'll have you dead and twitching before you even know they've opened fire, fusion claws that'll have your arm off like a fucking lightsaber. These things right here are the nastiest threat we face by a mile. He turned back towards the, by now thoroughly intimidated class, and gave them that winning smile. And they're still stupidly fucking easy to kill, he said. Wanna learn how? Date point. 4th year, 8th month, 2nd week, AV. Isbook. Planet ICup. Kirk. Kirk could hold his own in a fight, and then some. After Kevin Jenkins, he was the being who had scored the second most hunter kills during the raid on Outlook on Forever. He'd kept to his training throughout his political career, and his new vocation as an agent of the human race, and felt pretty confident that his skills were now at the sharpest they had ever been. It gave him a certain sense of assuredness and confidence as he picked his way carefully through the Isbert Street Market, but that sense was usually reinforced by the fact that Julian was in the crowd, following him. It was amazing. Humans stood out in the crowd, despite their smallness. There was just something about the way they moved, looked around, held themselves. Everything about a human was subconsciously predatory, and the herbivorous species of the galaxy gave them a wide berth as a result. Even wider, among those who had heard even a fraction of the newfound Deathworlders' abilities and reputation. But Julian could vanish. It was disconcerting. He would talk with Kirk would look away. When he looked back, there Julian wasn't. But if he spoke to him over the silent comms implant in his head, the Deathworlder would be at his side within seconds, never approaching from an expected angle, always silent. It sent instinctive flight signals right through the ancient animal parts of Kirk's brain, which he had to override by reminding himself that Julian was his friend and protector. Pleasingly, it even made Allison jump. In fact, he wondered if Julian was doing it specifically to get back at her for her teasing. "Jeez," she hissed, for the third time, as she turned and found him walking casually alongside her. "Will you stop that?" Several beings glanced at her, alarmed by a raised human voice. They looked away, aware that taking too much notice of the business of others was potentially serious trouble. Oddly, they seemed to ignore Julian. "Not joking this time," he said. "We're being tailed. Don't look." Kirk and Allison exchanged a glance. "Tailed?" Kirk asked. Trishnacho, three in the main group, one shadowing them. They're all wearing cloaks, but I saw combat harnesses underneath. Looked like a kind of uniform, white with 3 lines forming a triangle on them. "Is their leader female?" Kirk asked. "I think so, yes. She has a prosthetic arm." "Zokrup, a mercenary leader, almost as famous as Five-Scar Zikrup himself, and with good reason. Well, they've got some of those new jolt guns." "Options?" "Bear with me." Julian stepped aside as a Steve-Door drone grumbled past, carrying a crate of some kind, and disappeared. "Fuck's sake," Allison complained. "Where are you son of a bitch?" "Right here," he replied, walking past her in the opposite direction. "Jeez!" Julian kept going, vocalizing quietly over their private communications. "Quietly, please. There's a left turn up ahead into what smells like a spice market. Kirk, there's a Vistic at the second stall selling, and I'm quoting here, the oldest and slimmest Zerks in the Expanse." "Sounds nice. I could go for a really ancient Zerk right now." Allison muttered something that Kirk suspected might have been a complaint about how other species considered humans to be the strange ones. Julian just kept talking. "Good. Stop off and buy one. Haggle with the merchant. What they do next should tell us what they want. Allison, just like I showed you in training, alright?" "Sure," she muttered. "If they make a move, we'll let you talk for a minute, see what they want. If they're unfriendly, then we take out the 3 spares and maybe the Zorkrop can tell us something." "Non-lethal if you can, please," Kirk said. "The Tshirt syndicates tend to take a dim view of unauthorized violence in their territory." "You got it, boss. Enjoy your nice, rancid, dripping Zerk." Allison pulled her face, which only creased up further as they got closer to the Zerk vendor. "Dear God," she complained. "Fragrant, aren't they?" "Delicious," Kirk commented. "Good meeting, cousin. These smell as good as advertised." "Ah, it's an old family secret. We're in the Blackrock culture," the vendor replied happily, launching into the patter that was shared by merchants the galaxy over. "My father always said the batch wasn't ready until half of it had liquefied. Is that a human? Only my translator says she looks very ill, and I heard they carry dangerous diseases." "They have sensitive noses, and for some reason Zook smells repulsive to them," Kirk explained. "Don't worry, she has a suppression implant." "Zerk smells repulsive to them? I heard humans were strange, but The vendor faltered as Allison, who had gone a very strange colour, shot him the kind of murderous glare that only a truly irate Deathworlder could, but he rallied admirably. 3 for the price of 2, and I'm throwing their Tuxer front. "I have a better offer." The new voice belonged to, sure enough, Zorkrup, who showed something to the vendor as her 2 associates levelled shotguns at Allison. "You go on a break and forget you spoke to this cousin of yours," she stated. The vendor glanced back and forth twice, then fled, as did several others nearby. "One-shot Zorkrup," Kirk said. An admirable picture of calm for somebody addressing a feared mercenary. "I'm flattered. Somebody must think very highly of me to decide that I'm worth your time." "Compliments, Counselor. Excellent. If I didn't know better, I'd say that you were stupid enough to try and talk me out of my contract." "A good thing you know better, then. I'm well aware that you don't betray your employers." Zorkrup blinked slowly and visibly, the Trishnacho equivalent of rolling her eyes. "So why the clumsy attempt at sweet-talking me?" "I'm not allowed to be polite. Incidentally, is this a murder or just an abduction?" "Oh, it's an abduction, for now." "Taking out the tail. Get them." "Thank you," Kirk said to Zorkrup and Julian both. He drew and fired. The Trishnacho all focused on Allison, who threw herself aside and rolled as she landed, fetching up behind a stall which grounded their shotgun bolts. And by the time they realised that, in fact, Kirk himself was the more serious threat, two of them were down with their limbs badly broken under the hammer blows of his pulse pistols, and his cybernetic arm had whipped up and extended the fusion blade hidden within it. The air sea where the blade had slipped right through Zokra's personal shield, and was now warring with the force field boundary. Greasy Chesnasho's sweat erupted all over her face, and the sight of a lethally sharp point held perfectly steady, only an inch away from what passed for her nose. Having a total of 4 arms had some major advantages. Among them was the ability to hold 4 weapons. "Bad move, Counselor," Zokra spat, even as she dropped her own weapon. "If you're referring to the rest of your party, my own backup has taken care of that," Kirk said. Years of politics had schooled him in the art of ambiguity, never committing to specific numbers when vagueness could hint at accuracy, where precision might be completely wrong. "Afraid I used a little too much force there," Julian added, arriving right next to the already nervous Zorkrup and nearly causing her to impale herself on Kirk's blade as she started. "You guys really break easily." Kirk saw in the way Zorkrup's shoulders sat that they definitely scored a hit. "Allison?" She emerged from behind the stall, smoothing her hair down. Static electricity was holding it out away from her head and crackling viciously as she tried to tidy herself up. "Are bad hair days going to be a feature of decoy duty?" she asked. Date point: 4th year, 8th month, 2nd week, AV. Series base, Sol. Drew Cavendish. The largest part of excavating a giant hole in the ice, as with excavating a giant hole anywhere, was moving all of the material out of the hole. In low gravity, the job came with a whole mess of additional challenges. All of their gear had been designed and built in Earth's gravity, for the tolerances it imposed. Jury-rigged engineering solutions had turned some of those limits on their heads. The sturdy steel arms of the excavators could now wield truly immense buckets, and, so long as they moved carefully and slowly to account for the fact that the forces imposed by mass hadn't changed, were clearing the spoil much faster than would have been possible on Earth. Piloting those excavators while wearing a vacuum hardsuit was another matter entirely, and usually fell to Tracy Monroe, the mining team's petite, girly girl, who seemed to take a positive delight in being the one who got to play with the big manly toys, while all the roughneck males were stuck holding the surveying equipment and holding the crates of explosives. Her helmet to Carl was a stylized Norma Jean, manning an enormous bulldozer and grinning wildly inside her helmet. "Hey boss," she called out, as Drew walked past her cabin with the spray paint for marking drill points for the explosives. "Yeah? Why wasn't the geologist hungry?" Drew just rolled his eyes inside his helmet. "Do tell." "He'd lost his appetite." The open channel filled with groans and snorts of amusement. Somebody else piped up. "Hey Marilyn, you know any jokes about sodium?" "Nah." Drew could hear the gleeful grin both of the jokers wore after the setup was received. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "My sentiments exactly." That one earned the culprit, an American coal miner whose racy fallen angel to Carl had earned him the nickname Wings, a chorus of amused condemnation, and he took a bow, a difficult task in the rigid hardsuit. It saved his life. There was a flash of light, and a thump fell through the soles of the feet, as something bright streaked down out of the interplanetary dark and carved a trench in the dig site behind Wings. To a man, the team turned away and cowered, protecting their faceplates against shrapnel. Drew felt something glance off his upper arm with a force that knocked him off his feet. He landed gently in the tiny gravity of Sirius' surface and hauled himself upright, hollering into the open channel. "Everyone okay? Check in." He glanced at the impact site in his upper arm. The impact had dented one of the rigid plates rather than hitting a joint, so the worst damage was some missing paint, a starburst of ugly grey between all of the scuffed yellow and black. "Jesus fucking shit, oh my god, fuck. Wings, check in. I'm gonna throw up, fuck." Drew looked up. The impact had flung Wings high into, for lack of a better term, the air, and he was tumbling wildly. Suit bubbled inside the high visibility yellow glow of his emergency force field. "Don't you fucking dare, mate. Just like we practiced. Focus on your heads-up display, you remember?" Yeah, focus on the HUD." Deep breaths. With his mind snapped onto what he could do to help himself, Wings showed why he was on the team by rapidly getting himself under control, both mentally and physically. A few precisely timed puffs of propellant from his safer, and his spin was corrected. "Get yourself indoors, mate," Drew ordered him. "Way ahead of you, Chief." "Everyone else okay?" he asked. The request was redundant. His own HUD showed summarized information for all of the team members, anyone with a breach, a popped field, or worrying vital signs would have been highlighted in red, but the very safety protocols that he himself had written call for everyone to check themselves and their work buddies. Redundancy saved lives. It took them only seconds to check in, confirm that they were all intact and well, and could see no alarming signs of damage on any of their fellows. He ordered the team indoors anyway. Nobody knew whether a damaged suit might blow after staying sealed for a few minutes, but he didn't feel like finding out. With his immediate duties taken care of, the next step was a sieve rep. "Tower," he called on the operations channel. "This is Dig 1 Foreman. What the fuck?" Dig 1, serious incident up here. All radio traffic has been recorded. Over?" The operator's over was obsolete thanks to the radio squelch, but the man was clearly being on his absolute best behaviour for the record. Drew knew he'd been unprofessional with his own outburst, but the adrenaline was making it hard to keep a calm and composed outlook. "No shit, it's a serious incident. We nearly lost a man down here," he exclaimed. "What the hell hit us?" We're still determining that, Dig 1. Over." "Well, while you're determining it, this dig's closed to my orders. We're heading inside for a full inspection. We've got suit damage out there." Roger that, Dig 1. I have you, coming in?" The radio squelched, then squelched again. Over." The place must have been a madhouse. Drew knew that the traffic operators were cool under even the most intense pressure, so for one of them to be so obviously flustered was worrying. "Keep me informed, Tower. Dig 1 Foreman out." He was last into the triple-door airlock, and it was only once they were safely in the mining suit workshop, behind the base's triple-skin hull and thick concrete outer wall, that he allowed himself to relax and authorized a suit crack. Wings' suit was ruined, the rivet torn up and peeled open by flying shards of steel-hard ice. The man himself was badly hurt too, though sheer adrenaline had kept him from realizing the fact. Bloody skin was visible at the bottom of some of the craters and gouges. They cut him out of it, as their first order of business, staunching the bleeding as best they could until the medics arrived and carried him away. Drew M. stood aside to let them pass as he entered. His perpetual smile and the amused creasing around his eyes were both gone. As much as his tan skin would allow, he looked pale, unwell, and anxious. "Strofe," he commented, proving that there were some things that no amount of stress could drive out of him. "Yep," Cavendish replied. "The fuck happened, mate?" "Ask those useless twats up in the tower," Drew C. told him, turning around to start removing his own suit. "Yeah, they're about as useless as an ashtray. Jesus, fuck! Cavo, have you seen the back of your head?" Usually this impossible query would have earned a sarcastic retort and some friendly insults. Instead, Drew paused, then unlatched his helmet seals and lifted it off. There was a triangular shard of ice the size of a credit card lodged in the back of his helmet, smack in the middle of the thickest bit, and still just penetrating through to open a hole to the interior. 2 inches to either side, and it would have lobotomized him. The whole crew gave out a gawk at it. The reverent silence was finally broken by the phone. Drew M. stabbed the speaker button to answer it. "Workshop, tower manager here." The speaker sounded much more composed than whoever Drew had spoken to only minutes ago. "You all okay down there?" Drew M. glanced around and said, "One of our guys is getting sewn back together. Got major suit damage on a few others. The bloody hell happened?" "From what we can tell, one of the Orhul drones suffered some kind of control software failure and fired its primers on final approach rather than retros." "How does that even happen?" asked O'Neill. "You gotta be there. The operator managed to force reset and restore control, but most we could do by then was deflect it. Taking it the other way would have crashed it into the base itself. Sorry for the scare." Cavendish spoke up so that the phone could hear him. "Sounds like the right call to me," he said. "Yeah, well, we're starting the critical incident investigation up here. Meetings in 3 hours." "We'll be there," both of the Drews chorused. There was a click as the tower manager put his end of the phone down. Drew M. turned to Cavendish, his jaw set at a grim angle. "Bloody oath, mate. I'm never calling you paranoid again," he said. Date point: 4th year, 8th month, 2nd week, AV. Uzbek, Planet Express. Kirk. Uzbek's architecture was a study in graceless, off-white concrete cubes, ruddy and austere in the sullen red light that penetrated the great force-filled dome. That dome made Uzbek a city with breathable oxygenated air, rather than a sand dune and a gasping death, followed by erosion under the relentless sandstorms. Still, somehow, the sand and dust crept in, and were swept into the cheaper, poorer districts, where it accumulated, until somebody was finally motivated to organize a crusade against the cloying orange powder that rounded out every corner and undulated across the road in the stiff artificial breeze of the atmosphere systems. For once, the human predilection for clothing seemed like a sensible concession to hostile environments, rather than the strange cultural peccadillo. The grit between Kirk's toes was chafing him terribly, and he was devoting his upper hands full time to shielding his eyes from airborne dust, whereas Julian and Allison were both wearing high-laced tan boots, sourced from army surplus back on Earth, and seemed perfectly comfortable inside their hooded jackets. It was only when he glanced sideways at them that he realised that they were both wearing dark glasses and some kind of flimsy white mask over their noses and mouths. If not for the subtle differences in body shape between male and female, he wouldn't have been able to tell them apart. "Could I have one of those?" he asked, after his third sneezing coughing fit. Julian modestly produced one from his pocket on his leg and handed it over. "You can try," he said. Kirk held it over his nose and tried to inhale. It was difficult beyond belief. "I think I'm using it wrong," he said. "It's just a filter. You're using it right. People wear these things all the time back on Earth." Kirk tried again. It was like trying to inhale for a wall. "They do?" "You sure? I hear you can get them with, like, animal faces and stuff printed on over in China." Kirk handed it back. "How can you breathe this thing on?" he asked. "Deathworlder." "Of course, Oh, good. This is the address." "Your old friend likes the low life," Allison commented, surveying the street. The nearest garbage pile contained pieces of automated garbage collection drone. "Far from it," Kirk told her, "but he's a practical being the diplomat." "Diplomat?" Allison asked. "This guy's from your Security Council days?" "Before that, even. He and I go all the way back to the Outlook and Forever, long before it was famous. There, that's the building." "You sure? It looks pretty much like all the others." "It's the only one with a big enough door." They ducked through a swell of dust and paused on the opposite side of the street, where Julian looked up and tensed, ready to leap. A hand landed on his shoulder. "Nuh-uh, Mr. Jungle, it's my turn to be the badass." Allison sprang up the wall, grabbed a cutaway that was the closest thing to ornamentation on the bland grey buildings, and swarmed up it in the low gravity. Kirk watched and admired as she turned to the top and caught the bag that Julian threw her, an item which he himself had trouble even lifting, but which the Deathworlder lobbed up to the roof height with one hand and only a small grunt of exertion. "You sure we need that?" Julian asked him. "I tell that mercenary up pretty good." "Traditional mercenaries don't get a reputation like hers without being almost as dangerous as you are," Kirk said. "She underestimated us last time. Let's not make the same mistake." "Makes sense." "What did you bring for yourself?" Julian just tugged his jacket aside. Hanging from his belt was a knife as long as one of Kirk's hands and a hatchet. "Just the essentials," he said, almost apologetically, as if he wasn't carrying weaponry that could bring down a Volzer. Knocking on the door produced no effect at first, but then, just as Julian was about to ask if he was sure they had the right place, the door, sealed against the invasive dust, popped and freely swung inwards. They stepped inside, and Julian closed the door behind them, squinting to see in the darkness inside. Something glowed an unwell yellow-green in the far corner. A voice spoke, quietly, as a heavy bulk around the glow shifted. "Vedrick! Oh, Vedrick, what did they do to you?" Kirk rushed forward. "Loo!" The big being chaffed deep in his chest, something similar to a laugh. "Mugaravlun, Murgutu, Mu, Mugutu, Muruluku." Vedrick shifted as the light came up, and Julian fought back a sudden heave in his stomach. The Gudavag's great shaggy scalp had been shaved, and terrible ugly wounds covered it, the blood a startling blue where it soaked his dressings. "You did this to yourself?" Kirk practically shrieked, clearly appalled. "No. Watva." There was a shocked silence during which Kirk only stared at his old friend, and Vedrick turned his head away, flanks fading from shade to shade. Julian eventually had to ask, "What's he say?" Kirk looked up at him. "He said it was the only way to escape them." Date point: 4th year, 8th month, 2nd week, AV. Fault for Colony, Simbreen. Captain Owen Powell. "Captain!" Ross was at a dead run for the direction of the sensor array. The cobbled-together menagerie of technology that Adrian Saunders had installed had been one of the first projects in the colony to be housed inside a permanent structure, where it had been added to, patched into a series of monitors, and generally turned into the beating nerve centre of the colony's intelligence network. "There's a ship coming in, sir. 5 parsecs out. Looks like a freighter. Straight at us." He reversed course and matched the captain as Powell ran towards the sensor array and landing platform, handing him an earpiece. "Legsy, drop it and gear up," Powell yelled. Legacy had already paused his demonstration as Ross approached. Now he snapped out of jocular instructor mode and into hardened Special Forces veteran, pausing only long enough to acknowledge the order before heading to the armory, long legs eating up the turf. Powell got his earpiece in and keyed it. Myrmidon, ground is incoming contact. Looks like a civilian freighter. Can you see it? He asked. We do, Captain. It's still too far away to make out details, but it's big, it's slow, and it's using a warp drive. Agree that it looks like a freighter. Have the hunters seen it yet? There's been no increase of chatter on their channels to indicate as much. If our best estimates as to their sensor range are accurate, then we should see them start to take notice in about 5 minutes. Any way to contact them? Not until they're in range of the swarm to see them, and they're too slow to escape. It'll be a massacre. Powell gritted his teeth. Watching the escape pod arrive a fortnight earlier had been tough. That tiny vessel had stood no chance in hell, and had been scooped wholesale into the belly of a swarm ship that had decloaked like a breaching well, and swallowed the little craft whole. He weighed his options. It could be a trap. A stolen freighter full of the toughest and best armed hunters that the swarm of swarms could muster, in which case, any rescue mission would most likely end in death. But what rescue mission could they realistically pull off anyway? Potent and reinforced as they were, neither of the salvage hierarchy ships would stand up to the hungry enemy at their gates. He explained as much to Captain Manning as he entered the groundside CIC, familiarising himself at a glance with the latest updates as the sensors teased new information from the unfolding situation. We may have a solution there, Manning replied. It's a risk, but I'm not watching a freighter full of people die on my watch. Assuming it's not a trap, Powell reminded him. I'm prepared to take that risk, Captain. I was hoping you'd say that. What's your solution? Date point. 4th year. 8th month. 2nd week. AV. Isberg. Plant Express. Allison Buer. Hey, guys. That mercenary found us. Allison settled in under the cloak that Julian had so thoughtfully packed into the bag. It wasn't much. In fact, it was little more than rough sacking, but the colour blended with the concrete and dust of a rooftop perfectly. At most, she would look like a tarpaulin left on the rooftop storage to keep the dust out, here in a place where it never rained. Reinforcements? Julian asked her. I see 5, not counting that Zorat bitch. Only 5, I smell a rat. Allison took that seriously. Julian was a blushing disaster with women, and a heck of a lot of fun to tease and flirt with, but she also knew that he had an unrivaled instinct for dangerous situations. I can't move without risking them spotting me, she said. I can see the whole road, but don't ask me about the alleys. Leave that to me. One jungle's pretty much like the other, huh? Better. No sticks to break, no sticks to step on. There was a pause. Allison had no idea how Julian had exited the building, but she had every confidence that he had, somehow. Okay, he finally said, as the mercenaries continued down the street, knocking on doors, and intimidating the frightened, impoverished residents who dared, or were coerced to open up. Alleyways are empty. Weird. They can't be that overconfident, can they? Not after what we did back in the market. Not if they got a brain, and I'm thinking Zorkrub does. Allison watched the Cheshire show. In question, removed something slimy from a facial orifice, inspected, then eat it. Oh yeah, she's a shoo-in for Mensa. Oh shit, stay down. Allison did so, burrowing back from the edge and down under her cloak. After a second or two, her ears caught what Julian had heard, and she tucked herself up as small and unnoticeable as she could manage, just peeking over the top of her wall. Something that reminded her of a crane fly came skimming low over the rooftops and spun gently above the middle of the street. Allison blinked as it kicked up a real wind to replace the half-hearted synthetic breeze, full of particulate irritants. Kirk chimed in. What's going on out there? He demanded. They brought a gunship, Julian said. Don't show your face or it'll level the building. Wrong, Allison said, quietly. What do you mean wrong? I'm looking right at it. They brought 3.